I'll write the full US English story now, following all the rules, opening climax, short global call-out, 12 plus real twists, mystery box, causality, storm as the ticking clock, bookend ending, no digits, no animal cruelty. The rotor blades were already tearing the cold morning air apart when Ghost broke from Ryan Callahan's side and hurled himself flat across the frozen grass beneath the helicopter's landing skids. His amber eyes locked on the tree line. He would not move. Ryan stopped mid-stride, and every man on that ridge stopped breathing with him. "Callahan!" Paula shouted over the wind. "Get your dog out from under my aircraft right now!" But Ryan had already seen it. Something out there was still alive. Before we go any further, tell me down in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. And go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. Ryan Callahan was 38 years old, and he had spent 12 of those years wearing a uniform he no longer owned. 3 combat deployments had left him with a crescent-shaped scar on his left forearm, a hearing loss he refused to admit to, and a Belgian Malinois named Ghost, who had come home with him from Camp Lejeune the same week his marriage had ended. He worked search and rescue now out of a small station on the north side of Asheville, North Carolina, and most of the time, the work was quiet. Lost hikers, runaway teenagers who wanted to be found by supper time, an old woman with dementia who had drifted from her porch in Weaverville and made it half a mile before the neighbors caught up. This one was not quiet. For 36 hours, the team had combed the western slopes of Pisgah National Forest for a 14-year-old boy named Kevin Price. Kevin had not come home from a Saturday morning fishing trip. His mother, Carol Price, had called the sheriff's office at 8 o'clock that night, apologizing for bothering anyone, saying she was probably worrying over nothing, saying he was probably at a friend's. But her voice had broken halfway through the sentence, and the deputy had heard it, and by 10, the ground search was on. By dawn, they had a helicopter. By the second morning, they had 30 volunteers, 4 dogs, 2 ATV teams, and a growing dread that no one wanted to name out loud. Now it was Monday morning, and the ice storm the Weather Service had been threatening for 2 days was finally sitting on the far side of the ridge, waiting for permission to come in. Incident Commander Paula Morse had spent the last hour on the sat phone with the district meteorologist and had finally called the search. Everything and everyone off the mountain by 10 o'clock. No exceptions. She had looked Ryan in the eyes when she said it and told him she was sorry. She had a 19-year-old daughter of her own. She knew what she was calling. The team had loaded their gear into 2 pickups, and the helicopter had powered up on the small helipad they had improvised at the edge of the clearing. Ryan had shouldered his pack, whistled Ghost to heel, and started walking toward the open door. He had made it 4 steps. Ghost had not. The dog had stopped halfway across the clearing, spun 180 degrees, and dropped into a stalk Ryan had only seen him do twice before, both times in places nobody was allowed to talk about afterward. Ryan had turned and called him. Ghost had ignored the call. Ryan had called again, sharper this time, using the working name he only used when the dog was on scent. And Ghost had crawled the last few feet on his belly and planted himself directly in front of the skid. Now the pilot was leaning out and shouting. Now Paula was leaning out and shouting. Now the rotor wash was pushing so hard at Ryan's back it felt like it was going to lift him off the ground against his will. And Ryan Callahan stood there in the middle of a clearing 4 miles from any road, less than 4 hours from an ice storm, and made a choice that would follow him for the rest of his life. He dropped his pack. He turned his back on the helicopter. He walked toward his dog. Paula shouted his name one more time. She had known him for 6 years. She had trained with him. She had signed his psych evaluations. She had brought him into search and rescue after his discharge because she knew what he could do and because she trusted him. And now, watching him walk away from the only ride off that mountain, she was faced with the choice every incident commander dreads. Pull a man off the ridge against his will, or leave him. Ryan looked back once. He did not shout anything. He only lifted his hand, palm flat, thumb out, the old signal from a country neither of them had spoken of in a long time. It meant, "I am staying." It meant, "Do not come after me." Paula slammed her hand against the doorframe. She said something the rotor swallowed, and she gave the pilot the sign. The helicopter lifted. The clearing filled with a downdraft that smelled of aviation fuel and hemlock and something else, the faint, cold, metallic scent of the storm sitting behind the ridge. Ryan watched the aircraft climb over the ridgeline, bank hard to the east, and disappear behind the granite face of Pisgah Mountain. Then it was quiet. Then it was very, very quiet. Ghost had not moved. Ryan knelt beside him and rested his hand on the ridge of the dog's shoulder. He could feel Ghost trembling, not from the cold. Ghost was never cold, but from the tightness of scent work, the way a dog's whole body vibrates when something is close and everything in the world has narrowed to a single line. Ryan spoke to him low. "Show me." Ghost rose. He did not look at Ryan. He looked at the trees to the east, took 3 careful steps, and started to move. Ryan grabbed his pack, unclipped the top strap, checked his radio, checked the small orange emergency vest folded on top, checked the length of climbing line he always kept coiled inside. He owed himself 30 seconds of thinking, and he took them. The temperature was 34 degrees and dropping. The forecast said the ice would start on the east ridge around 1:30 in the afternoon and be full-fed by 3. He had, at the outside, 4 hours of usable time before the ground turned to glass. The clearing was at about 2,800 feet. Whatever Ghost was scenting was downhill and east, which meant lower ground, colder air, denser cover, no cell signal, and, past a certain point, no way back up without a rope. He knew all of this. He did not, in that moment, particularly care. He shouldered the pack. He clicked his handheld from monitor to transmit. "This is Callahan. I am off the extraction. Ghost is on scent, moving east from the LZ. I will maintain radio contact as long as I have signal." The reply came back crackling and distant. Paula's voice level as a knife. "Copy, Callahan. Note the storm. I want to check in every 15 minutes. Copy 15. Ryan. Yeah, you bring him back. Bring both of them back." He did not answer that. He clipped the radio to his shoulder harness and stepped into the trees. The hemlocks closed over his head like a slow ceiling. The light dropped by half, then by half again, and the temperature dropped with it. Ghost was ahead of him now, 10 feet, then 20, moving in the tight sinusoidal weave of a scenting dog, nose down, nose up, nose down again. Ryan followed. He did not try to lead. This was not the part of the job where the human was in charge. For the first 10 minutes he watched only Ghost. He watched the ears, the shoulders, the tail. He watched the way the dog's stride shortened at a particular fallen log, then lengthened again on the far side. He watched the way Ghost swung suddenly north, held for 2 heartbeats, then swung south again and set his line. Whatever the trail was, it was old and thin, and the dog was pulling it out of the air 1 thread at a time. Then the ground broke. Not physically, not yet. What broke was Ryan's mental map. The team had briefed the whole ridge for 2 days, and Ryan had spent both nights over the topographic charts with a red pencil in his hand. Every marked trail, every logging cut, every drainage. He knew this piece of mountain the way you know a friend's house, but the small, unmarked seam Ghost was following now, a shallow cut through hemlock and rhododendron that dropped away toward the east, was not on any map he had studied. It was not on the district trail map. It was not on the sheriff's overlay. It was not on the geological survey. It was simply there, worn slightly in the leaf litter, the kind of trace only somebody who had walked it before would even recognize as a path. He stopped. He crouched. He touched the ground. Ghost paused ahead of him and looked back over his shoulder. There, in the mud beneath a curl of frozen leaves, was the print of a small boot. Not fresh, 2 days old maybe, but there. And beside it, a torn thread of neon orange nylon caught on the edge of a rhododendron branch, the color of an emergency blanket. "Good boy," Ryan whispered. "Good boy, go." Ghost went. They dropped for another 20 minutes, easy at first, then steeper. The seam Ryan was following twisted along the edge of a small creek bed that was almost, but not quite, a stream. In summer, it would be a trickle. Right now, it was a bone-hard channel of black rock and cold water and slick moss, and it was steepening as it went. Ryan checked his GPS. He was already 200 vertical feet below the clearing. His radio, when he keyed it, gave him a single bar and then no bars at all. He tried Paula anyway. Callahan moving east down an unmarked drainage. Signs of the subject, 200 feet below the LZ. Signal weak. The answer came back in fragments. He caught the word copy and nothing else. 15 more minutes. He was breathing hard now, not from the pace, but from the tightness in his chest. Two things were sitting in his head at once. One was the boot print. The other was the thought that whoever had made that print was still ahead of him and had made it 2 days ago. Ghost stopped. He stopped so abruptly that Ryan almost walked into his back leg. The dog's whole posture had changed. The scent weave was gone. Something else had taken over. He was standing straight, ears pinned forward, muzzle low, and every muscle in his body was locked. Ryan crouched beside him and looked where the dog was looking. The creek bed here made a hard right turn around a shoulder of granite. Just past that turn, the ground fell away sharply, and a rock shelf jutted out over the drop, 10 feet wide, 3 feet deep, canted just enough to hold anything that landed on it. Below the shelf, the creek continued down through a hollow so narrow you could nearly step across it, filled with the sound of running water and the whisper of wind moving over stone. On the shelf, folded in on itself, was what looked at first like a heap of orange plastic and old leaves. It took Ryan a full second to understand what he was looking at. The heap moved. A small grey face lifted itself out of the shredded emergency blanket. The eyes were huge, in a way only a 14-year-old boy's eyes can be huge, and cracked around the edges from too much crying and too little water. His hair was matted to his forehead, his lips were split, his hands were shaking so violently that he could not at first hold them still enough to reach out. "You came," Kevin Price whispered. He said it as if he were still afraid the shelf beneath him was going to prove imaginary. "You came." Ghost went down onto the rock shelf first. Ryan followed, slower, sliding on his boots, one hand out. The Malinois pressed his whole side against the boy in a single practiced movement, chest against the shivering ribs, muzzle laid flat across the small hands, giving up his body heat the way a working dog gives up everything on the last exercise of the day. Kevin, without speaking, without deciding to, wrapped both arms around Ghost's neck and pressed his face into the fur. Ryan let them have 5 seconds, then he moved. Kevin, look at me. Look up here. My name is Ryan Callahan. I am with Search and Rescue. I need you to tell me where it hurts." The boy said, "My ankle." Ryan felt down the boy's left leg through the torn hem of his jeans. The ankle was already twice the size of the right one and the color of a bruise going from purple to yellow. Broken, probably. 2 nights of cold and wet had done the rest. Kevin's core temperature was dropping, not hypothermia yet, not the killing kind, but on the road to it, and the road was not long. Anywhere else? Head? Neck? Back? No, just my ankle, and I'm so thirsty. Ryan pulled a bottle from his pack, unscrewed it, and held it to the boy's mouth. Kevin drank in short, desperate swallows and coughed. Ryan pulled it back before he could drink too fast. He waited a beat. He gave the boy another sip. He wiped the boy's chin with the sleeve of his own jacket. "How long have you been here, buddy?" "I don't know. It got dark twice." "2 nights?" "I think so. I heard the helicopter. This morning. I screamed. I screamed until nothing came out." Ryan felt something tighten in the base of his throat and pushed it away. He did not let it show on his face. He kept his voice even and warm. "I heard you," he said, which was not exactly a lie. "That's why we came back." "He heard me," the boy corrected, one hand moving on Ghost's shoulder. "Didn't he?" "Yeah," Ryan said. "He did. He keyed the radio. Nothing. Not a whisper. He was 380 feet below the clearing, in a hollow surrounded by granite, and the sky above the ridge was already beginning to turn the color of old lead. He looked up at the strip of grey visible above the trees, and he felt the temperature drop against his cheek in real time, not a slow drop. A step. The storm was not 4 hours out anymore. The storm was here. He checked his watch. It read 11:32. The first flakes started coming down at 11:34. By 11:40, they were the small, hard, sideways-driven flakes of the leading edge of an ice storm, more sleet than snow, hissing against the granite. By 11:45, he could hear the sound of the creek changing. The water was already fatter. Runoff from the ridges above was coming down faster than the hollow could carry it. He looked at Kevin. He looked at the rock shelf. He looked at the creek. He calculated. The rock shelf was maybe 1.5 feet above the current waterline. In an hour, at the rate the water was climbing, it might not be 1.5 feet above anything. The hollow was going to flood, not deep. It did not need to be deep to kill a 14-year-old boy with a broken ankle and a body temperature dropping toward hypothermia. 6 inches of ice water around them for 4 hours would be more than enough. But moving Kevin up out of the hollow was not an option. Ryan looked back the way they had come. The seam through the hemlocks was a stiff climb, even without a passenger. With Kevin on his back, with an ankle that couldn't take weight, and a boy who was already halfway to collapse, in this weather, on ice-slick rock, he would not make it 100 yards before he put both of them down. He knew this the way you know a door is locked when you have pulled the handle. He had one option left, and he did not like it. "Kevin," he said, "I need you to listen to me. We're not going up right now. We are going to stay here tonight, and I am going to build us something to keep the weather off." The boy's eyes went wide. "You said you would take me home. I will take you home, but not today. Today I'm going to keep you alive, and tomorrow morning a helicopter is going to come. Do you believe me?" Kevin looked at him. Then he looked at Ghost. Then he nodded. Ryan stood. He wiped snow off his eyelashes. He looked up at the granite wall to his right, tracing it with his eyes. Somewhere up there was one bar of signal. Somewhere up there was the only chance he had to get a message out. He turned to the boy. "Ghost stays with you. He is going to lie right there against you and keep you warm. I'm going up that wall for 2 minutes to try to reach my radio. 2 minutes. Do not move. Please don't leave me. I'm not leaving. Look. See where my pack is? I'm leaving it right here. I always come back for my pack." The boy tried to smile. He did not quite manage it. But he lay back down against Ghost's flank and let his eyes close for a second, and Ryan turned to the wall. The climb was 50 feet. He did it in 8 minutes because the granite was already slick and because he could not fall. His fingers went numb, and he made himself flex them one at a time. He reached a small ledge, wedged himself against a slab, and pulled out his radio. 1 bar. He mashed the transmit key. He kept it short. He had rehearsed it under his breath the whole climb. "Callahan to base. Subject found. Alive. GPS coordinates to follow. Broken ankle, mild hypo. Sheltering in place. Storm has arrived. Coordinates." He read the coordinates off his GPS twice, slowly, so that if the signal cut, at least half of it would have gone through the first time. Latitude, longitude, elevation. Then he tried again. "Callahan to base. Subject found. Alive. Coordinates." The 1 bar flickered and died. He tried 3 more times. Nothing. He did not know whether any of it had reached her. He did not know whether 10 seconds had gone through or none at all. He climbed back down. Kevin was where he had left him. Ghost was where he had left him. The creek was 2 inches higher than when he had left it. Ryan got to work. He built the shelter fast. He had done it 100 times, in worse conditions, in worse light, and now he did it in the ugly, hissing sleet of the storm's first hour. He hauled 2 large deadfall branches down from the tree line behind the shelf and jammed them at an angle against the granite wall to form a lean-to frame. He laid 4 smaller branches across the top. He stripped a rhododendron of its winter-thick leaves and layered them onto the frame. He unfolded the torn emergency blanket from Kevin's lap, tucked it around the boy from the neck down, and used his own poncho to seal the top of the lean-to against the wind. It was not warm. Nothing was warm, but it broke the sleet. And once the sleet was broken, the small heat of 1 man, 1 boy, and 1 Belgian Malinois could begin to accumulate under the poncho like a thin, bright thing. Before he closed the shelter, Ryan climbed the deadfall to the highest branch he could safely reach, unpacked the small, folded orange signal vest from his kit, and tied it to the branch. The wind snapped it out sideways at once, blaze-bright against the grey. From above, at first light, it would be the loudest thing on that mountain, if anyone was coming. He crawled inside. Kevin was already talking, feverish, half asleep talking. Ryan let him. It was at that point the best possible news. As long as the boy was talking, his body was still fighting. "My dad taught me," Kevin said suddenly, "about the blanket. He said always keep one, in the car, in your pack, in your jacket if it fits. He said the cold kills people who thought they were fine. Your dad sounds like a smart man." He was. Ryan felt the word land. Was. He did not push. Kevin, still with his eyes closed, said, "He was a firefighter in Charlotte. He died when I was 8. This blanket was in his gear bag. My mum kept it in the hall closet. I took it before I left." Ryan looked at the torn orange thing draped over the boy's shoulders. Now he could see, dim under the shredded panels, a small black stencil that read Engine 12, Charlotte Fire Department, and beside it, a printed name in worn ink. Sergeant Michael Price. He said gently, "You brought your dad's blanket with you." "Yeah." "Why did you come out here, Kevin? Why didn't you take the trail?" The boy's eyes stayed shut. His voice was small. "Because I wasn't coming back." Ryan felt the shelter go quieter around him than it already was. Ghost's ears twitched once and settled. Outside, the sleet kept moving. The runoff kept climbing. And in the smallest, most careful voice he owned, Ryan said, "Tell me what happened, buddy." Kevin told him. It came out in pieces, the way things do when a 14-year-old is exhausted and cold and too close to sleep to bother lying. His mother had remarried a year and a half ago. A man named Warren Dietrich, who lived in West Asheville and owned 2 auto body shops and had, at the wedding, told Kevin he was glad to be his family now. In the first 6 months, everything had been fine. In the second 6 months, it had stopped being fine. Warren was not a hitter. Warren did not lay a hand on anyone. Warren was worse than that in a way that Kevin, at 14, did not yet have a name for. He worked on you with words. He worked on you at the dinner table, in front of company, and in the front seat of the truck, when there was no company at all. He worked on your grades, and your posture, and your friends, and the way you held your fork, and the way you said your father's name. The last time Kevin had said his father's name at the dinner table, Warren had told him, very calmly in front of his mother, that he needed to stop dragging around a dead man like a security blanket. He needed to grow up. Kevin had gone up to his room. He had put 4 things into his school backpack: a water bottle, a pair of dry socks, a pack of granola bars, his father's emergency blanket from the hall closet. He had climbed out of his bedroom window at 4 o'clock in the morning. He had ridden his bicycle to the edge of the forest. He had walked in. "I wasn't going to hurt myself," he told Ryan, still with his eyes closed, and Ryan believed him. "I just wanted to go somewhere he couldn't find me and see if my mom would even notice." "Your mom noticed, Kevin. Your mom has 30 people out here looking for you. Really? Really? The boy did not answer. Ryan thought he had fallen asleep. Then, in a voice so low he almost missed it, Kevin said, "Do you think she'd believe me if I told her about Warren?" Ryan closed his eyes for a second. He thought about Carol Price, whose voice had cracked on the phone at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. He thought about the way a mother sounds when a piece of her has been walking around missing for 2 nights. "Kevin," he said, "your mom is going to believe every single word." The boy sighed. It was a long sigh, the kind a body lets out when it finally sets down something it has been holding. Ryan did not let him fall asleep, not yet. He sat him up against Ghost's shoulder, uncapped the water bottle again, made him drink. He unwrapped a foil-sealed protein bar from an inside pocket of his pack and broke it into small pieces, feeding Kevin 1 square at a time, waiting for each to go down. He checked the boy's fingers. The tips were white, but the color came back when he pressed them. He checked his lips. He checked his breathing. He talked. He talked about nothing on purpose. He told Kevin about his grandmother's farm in Boone and about the time he had fallen through the ice on a stock pond when he was 7, and about the sound his grandfather's voice had made when he pulled him out. He talked about Ghost. He talked about the day he had picked Ghost up at the base kennel and how the trainer had told him this was the smartest dog she had trained in 6 years, and that he was going to have to work every day for the rest of his life to keep up with him. Kevin laughed at that, a small, dry laugh, and Ryan laughed with him, and Ghost thumped his tail against the granite once, twice, 3 times, and did not lift his head. The wind rose. Ice began ticking against the poncho. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the light in the hollow went from grey to nearly dark. At 2, the temperature dropped another 5 degrees. At 3, the creek was 6 inches higher than when Ryan had climbed down from his 1-bar broadcast. At 4, the ice was coming down in sheets, and every branch above them was starting to sound like it was carrying more weight than it was built to carry. At 5, it was full dark, and Ryan Callahan sat with his back against a granite wall, a 14-year-old boy asleep against his ribs, a Belgian Malinois pressed against the boy's other side, and a broken orange vest tied to the top of a branch above him, and he began to count the hours until sunrise. Sunrise would be at 7:12. He had, if he could keep everyone breathing, 14 hours to go. Halfway across the mountain at a fire road staging area 8 miles east, Paula Morse sat in the front seat of her truck with her radio in her hand and stared at a piece of paper. The 10-second burst had come through at 11:49, not clean, not complete. She had been on the sat phone with the helicopter pilot at the time and had almost missed it. Her communications lieutenant, a young woman named Jenna, had lunged across the truck cab and caught the frequency shift by ear. What they had when they wrote it down was 14 broken words. Callahan, subject, alive, coordinates, and a partial string of numbers ending in a truncated elevation reading. Paula had every incident commander instinct she had built over 20 years, and every one of them was telling her the same thing. She had a man and a boy on that ridge, and she had incomplete coordinates, and she had currently no legal air asset she could put in the sky because the storm ceiling was at 300 feet and closing. Every part of the protocol she had ever signed said the same thing. Wait until first light. Do not risk a second casualty. She turned the paper over. She turned it back. She read the 14 words again. She read them a 3rd time. She picked up the radio. "Bishop," she said, calling the helicopter pilot by his last name because in 20 years she had never once called him anything else. "Get back down here to the fire road. I want the aircraft on the ground and warm and pre-flighted, and I want you and your co in the diner, and I want everyone sober and rested. First hint of ceiling at dawn, we go. I don't care how thin, we go." Bishop's voice came back through the static. "That's not a legal call, Morse." "I know it isn't. I'll be down in 10. She set the radio down. She looked out the windshield at the sleet moving sideways past her hood. She did not pray. She was not the praying kind. But she sat there for a full minute, with her hand flat on the paper and her thumb over the 14 words. And if you had asked her later what she was doing, she would not have been able to tell you. Back in the hollow, Ryan Callahan reached 6 o'clock without incident. It had, until then, been a bad night carried well. Kevin was asleep and staying asleep, which meant his body had settled on a fight it thought it could win. Ghost had not moved. The shelter was holding. The vest, when Ryan pushed the poncho aside once an hour to look, was still snapping bright orange in the ice. At 6:12, the branch above him cracked. Not the branch with the vest, a larger one higher up. He heard the sound before he understood what it was, a splitting wet groan, and then the whip of something heavy falling through smaller branches, and then a crash on the granite 5 feet behind their shelter. When Ryan turned, half the deadfall roof of his lean-to had collapsed inward. Sleet poured through the gap. Kevin was still asleep. Kevin did not stir. That, more than anything else, told Ryan how deep the boy had gone. He fixed the roof. He hauled another branch from the tree line, thicker this time, wedged it, layered the rhododendron again, resealed the poncho. It took him 42 minutes. His fingers were beyond feeling by the time he was done. He stuffed both hands under his armpits inside his jacket and let them come back one throb at a time. Then he crawled inside and found that Kevin was awake and staring at the ceiling with a look on his face Ryan did not like. "Where's Ghost?" "He's right here. He's right against your side. Can you feel him?" Kevin looked down. He put his hand on Ghost's flank. He nodded, once, small. "I couldn't feel him for a second." "That's the cold. That's all it is. Look at me. You are fine. You are with me. Ghost is with you. Say your mother's name." "Carol." "Say her middle name." "Anne. Her middle name is Anne." "That's right. Say the street you live on." "Pinecrest." "That's right. You are fine. Drink." He got another 2 swallows into the boy. He got another square of the protein bar. He talked to him, low, for the next 20 minutes, about anything he could put words to. He asked him about school. He asked him about the fishing spot he had claimed to be going to on Saturday morning. He asked him whether he had a girl at that school he liked and did not want to say. Kevin, thinly amused, told him no. And then, after a small silence, told him, actually, there was one. Her name was Mia. She sat 2 rows ahead of him in geometry. She had not so far noticed that he existed. "She'll notice now," Ryan said. Kevin laughed. It was the first real laugh either of them had heard on that mountain, and it startled Ghost, who lifted his head and cocked his ears and thumped his tail against Ryan's knee. At 7 o'clock, a piece of the creek let go. Ryan felt it before he heard it. A shift in the weight of the water, a change in the sound of it moving past the shelf. He crawled to the edge of the poncho and looked out. In the hour since he had last checked, the creek had jumped another 8 inches. The near edge of the rock shelf where they were sheltering was now exactly at the waterline. He had 2 hours before it flooded them out. He looked at Kevin. He looked at Ghost. He looked back at the granite wall. He thought about the wall. He thought about the ledge he had reached earlier for the radio broadcast. It was 50 feet up. Below the ledge, about halfway up, there was another small shelf, maybe 12 feet above the current waterline, wide enough for 2. He was going to have to move Kevin up the wall. He explained it to the boy, calm and low, exactly the way he was about to do it. He was not going to lie. He was not going to hide the difficulty. Kevin was old enough to understand and old enough to help. "I am going to put my climbing line on you. I'm going to loop the other end around that shoulder of rock up there. I'm going to climb up first with Ghost following behind me, and then I'm going to pull you up with the line while you use your good foot against the wall. Your bad foot is going to hurt. It is going to hurt a lot. I need you to make noise if you have to. I need you not to let go of the line." Kevin's eyes were wide. "I can't." "You can. Because you have to. Your mom is at home right now waiting for the phone to ring. She is going to answer the phone tomorrow morning, and the person on the other end is going to say your name. You understand me?" The boy swallowed. He nodded. Ryan set the line. He did it slowly, twice, checking every knot. He rigged a hasty harness around the boy's chest and under his arms, padded with the shredded orange blanket so the line would not cut. He whistled Ghost to attention, and Ghost, who had done wall work before in another life, followed him up the granite one steady claw at a time. The climb up was the easy part. The pull was the hard part. Ryan reached the 12-foot shelf, braced himself against the granite wall behind him, wrapped the line once around a boulder for friction, and hauled. Below him, Kevin cried out, once high and sharp, and then went silent. Ryan hauled again. He heard the boy's boot scrape the rock. He heard him breathing hard. He heard him not give up. Kevin came up over the edge of the shelf on Ryan's third pull, chest heaving, eyes streaming, and collapsed onto the granite. Ghost, who had gone up ahead, was already pressed against him before he could shiver twice. Ryan looked down. The rock shelf where they had spent the last 7 hours was, 30 seconds later, underwater. He sat on the 12-foot shelf for a long minute with his back against the wall, holding the line, watching his own breath cloud in front of him, and did not, for that long minute, think about anything. Then he built a smaller shelter, worse than the first one, on 8 feet of granite in the dark, and he crawled inside with the boy and the dog, and he began the second half of the night. At 3 in the morning, Kevin started shaking, not the shivering he had been doing for hours, a different kind. His whole body was moving in short, hard spasms, and his skin under Ryan's fingers was cold in a way that meant the fight in his core was losing. Ryan checked his lips, blue at the edges, checked his fingers, white past the second knuckle, called his name. Kevin answered on the second try and slower on the third. Ryan did every trick he knew. He stripped his own jacket off and wrapped it around the boy on top of the poncho. He put his own body against Kevin's on one side and Ghost's on the other and made a sandwich of them, all his heat and all Ghost's heat pouring into the small, cold body between them. He put a foil hand warmer from the bottom of his pack against the boy's chest under his shirt. He made Kevin talk. He made him name every street from his house to his school. He made him name every teacher he had ever had. He made him name the color of his mother's kitchen. At 3:47, Kevin stopped shaking. Ryan did not know in that moment whether that was good news or the worst news he had ever been given. He held the boy's wrist and found a pulse and counted it against his watch and told himself it was steady enough. He told himself it was steady enough for a while longer. He looked up at the poncho. He looked at the sky through the gap in the branches. He could not see any stars. He could not see anything. He put his hand against the boy's neck under the collar and left it there and closed his eyes for the first time in almost 24 hours, and he did not sleep, but he stopped thinking, and that was, for a moment, close enough to rest that he took it. At 5:30 in the morning, the wind changed. He felt it against the edge of the poncho, a shift in direction, and then a shift in temperature, up half a degree, then up a full degree. He crawled to the poncho and lifted a corner. The sleet had stopped. The sky above the trees was still black, but the color of the black was different. Below the branches, the water in the hollow had begun to slow. At 6:10, the first thread of grey touched the top of the ridge. At 6:40, Kevin opened his eyes. He said, "Is it morning?" "It's morning." "Am I alive?" "You are alive." "I don't feel alive." "You're alive, Kevin. I promise you. Stay with me just a little bit longer." Kevin nodded and closed his eyes again, and Ryan did not let him fall asleep, but he did not have to fight him to keep him awake, because just then, faint and far to the east, riding low above the tree line, they both heard the sound of a helicopter. Kevin's eyes opened wide. "Is that?" "It's her." "Is she coming?" "She's coming." Paula Morse had lifted off from the fire road at 6:52. The ceiling had been marginal, the visibility had been worse. Bishop had not asked for a second opinion. She had run one grid pass east of the coordinates in the burst and had seen nothing. She had run one grid pass west of the coordinates and had seen nothing. She had, on the third pass, come up along the seam of the unmarked drainage, and her co-pilot, a former Marine named Delgado, had spotted a flash of blaze orange strapped to a branch 300 feet down from a granite wall in a hollow that did not appear on any of her maps. He said, "Orange, 9 o'clock low." She banked hard. She saw the vest. She saw, 12 feet above the receding waterline, the small, dark shape of a rock shelf, and beneath a torn poncho, the smaller, darker shapes of a man and a boy and a dog. She keyed the radio. "Callahan," she said, "if you can hear me, wave your arm." Ryan crawled to the edge of the shelf and pushed the poncho aside and lifted his hand into the cold morning air. Paula, in the front seat of the helicopter, put her forehead against the door frame for exactly 1 second. Then she straightened up and started giving orders. The hoist came down at 7:11. Delgado came down with it. He was on the shelf inside a minute and a half. Kevin went up first, strapped into a rescue basket, wrapped in a heated blanket the moment he cleared the door of the aircraft. Ryan went up second, with Ghost clipped to his harness and pressed against his chest, because Ryan had told Delgado, calmly and without discussion, that the dog was going up with him or nobody was going up. Delgado had looked at him, said, "Copy," and clipped the dog on. The aircraft banked east and climbed over the ridge. Kevin Price arrived at Mission Hospital in Asheville at 7:42 in the morning. He was diagnosed with a stable fracture of the left tibia and fibula, moderate exposure, and a manageable case of mild hypothermia. He was warmed, hydrated, splinted, and stabilized inside the first hour. Carol Price arrived in the emergency room at 7:58, having driven from Pinecrest Street at a speed the state of North Carolina generally does not sanction, and she was allowed back into her son's room at 8:06. She did not speak. She did not, for a long time, do anything except stand at the foot of the bed and look at him. Kevin, weak and wrapped in blankets and hooked up to a warm IV, looked back. Finally, he said, "Mom, I have to tell you something." Carol Price sat down on the edge of the bed and took his hand. "Tell me anything," she said. Kevin told her. Not all of it. Not right away. Enough of it. Enough for a mother to put her hand over her mouth and hold it there for a long moment, and enough for her to lean down and put her forehead against her son's forehead and whisper in a voice that was a promise. "That's never happening again. Do you hear me? Never." She meant it. Kevin was discharged 3 days later. The night after his discharge, Carol Price sat down at her kitchen table on Pinecrest Street with Warren Dietrich and, in a level voice, told him he had 1 week to move his things out of her house. She meant that too. He left in 5 days. He did not, to Carol's quiet relief, put up much of a fight. Men like Warren Dietrich tend not to. Ryan Callahan did not know any of that yet. He was sitting at that same moment in a windowless office at the Asheville Search and Rescue Station, across a desk from a district director he had never met, being told in careful, bureaucratic English that his decision to leave a helicopter extraction against his commander's orders was a serious violation of protocol. There would be a formal written reprimand. There would be a mandatory review. There would be a 2-week suspension without pay. The director looked up from the paperwork at Ryan and said, "Off the record, for what it's worth, if that boy had died out there, we would be having a very different conversation." Ryan said, "Yes, sir." "He didn't die." "No, sir." "Sign here." Ryan signed. He walked out of the office. He walked past Paula in the hallway, who did not look at him, but reached out as he passed and gripped his shoulder once and let go. He walked out into the parking lot. He put Ghost in the passenger seat of his truck. He drove home to a small house in Weaverville that he had lived in for 4 years and had never quite finished unpacking. There was an envelope in his mailbox. The handwriting on the front was careful, small and slightly slanted. It was addressed to Ryan Callahan, care of the Asheville Search and Rescue Station, and had been forwarded to his home. The return address was Carol Price, Pinecrest Street. He sat down on his front step with Ghost beside him and opened it. Inside was one page, handwritten, blue ink. Mr. Callahan, they told me you got in trouble for what you did. They told me you gave up a ride off the mountain. They told me you spent a night in an ice storm with my son. I'm not going to try to thank you. There is no word for this that I would not embarrass both of us by writing, so I am going to tell you what happened this morning instead. Kevin ate breakfast at the table. He asked me for a second bowl of oatmeal. He asked me whether we could buy a dog. He said he had been thinking about it, and he thought a dog would be good for our house. He looked me in the eye when he asked me. He has not looked me in the eye at breakfast for a year and a half. I did not know that until this morning. I did not know a lot of things. I have some phone calls to make about a man who used to live in this house, and some choices to make about the kind of home my son is going to grow up in. I am making them today. I want you to know that. I want you to know that some of what your dog dug up out of that hollow was my son, and some of it was me, and both of us are going to walk out of the woods now because of you. I do not have anything to give you. I am putting this letter in the mail. I hope you keep it. I hope on the days when you have to answer to someone about the choice you made, you take it out and read it. You brought my boy home. You brought me home too. Carol Price. Ryan folded the letter. He folded it once, and then he folded it again, and then he put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, right against the seam. He sat on the step for a long time. Ghost, at some point, put his head across Ryan's boot and stayed there. The 2-week suspension started the following Monday. Ryan spent the first week doing nothing but taking Ghost on very long walks and cooking, badly, the kinds of meals he had been meaning to learn to cook for 6 years. He read a book he had been meaning to read since before his last deployment. He fixed the porch step. He replaced 2 of the boards on the fence that Ghost had chewed as a puppy. He slept most nights better than he had slept in a decade. On the 8th day, Paula Morse called him. There is a 14-year-old girl missing from Brevard, she said. Wandered off from a school trip yesterday. It's cold, but not storm cold. I know you're technically off the roster. I would like you back on it. When? An hour ago. On my way. He hung up. He whistled Ghost from the yard. He clipped his lead. He picked up his pack. At the door, before he stepped outside, he stopped. He put his hand against the inside pocket of his jacket. He felt the shape of the folded page, still there. He tapped it once with his thumb. Then he went to work. 6 months after the night in the hollow, in the early evening on a Sunday in June, Ryan Callahan drove out to a small park on the north side of Asheville, a scrubby field with a chain-link fence and 2 picnic tables and a plastic slide going a little yellow in the sun. He parked at the curb. Ghost was in the passenger seat. Ghost, at 9 years old, had begun sleeping a little more than he used to. The muzzle around his amber eyes had started to grey at the edges. The dog got out of the truck a beat slower than he once had, and Ryan slowed with him. Under the tree at the far end of the field, a woman was standing beside a picnic table. Beside her, a boy on a set of new crutches was practicing walking without them. He was not steady, but he was upright and he was doing it, and every 3rd or 4th step, his mother reached out one hand toward his elbow and he waved her off. Kevin looked up. His face split into the widest, most unguarded grin. Ryan had seen a 14-year-old boy allow himself in a long time. He shouted, "Ghost!" He did not shout Ryan's name first. He shouted, "Ghosts!" And nobody at that picnic table, including Ryan, minded even a little. Ghost, 96 pounds of Belgian Malinois with greying eyebrows, sat down on his haunches at the edge of the grass, cocked his ears forward, and waited. He waited the way a working dog waits when he has been introduced to somebody once already, and would like very much to be introduced again. Kevin came across the field on his crutches faster than he should have. Carol came a step behind him, one hand ready to catch, but not catching. The boy dropped to his knees in the grass in front of the dog. Ghost, without waiting for the command, pressed the whole side of his head into the boy's chest and stayed there. Kevin wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. He said, low, into the fur, "You came." Ghost's tail thumped once against the grass. It was the same word the boy had said in the hollow 6 months earlier, on a rock shelf 12 feet above a rising creek in the middle of an ice storm. It was the same voice mostly. The face above the voice was a different face now. Filled out a little, slept a little more. A face that had, in the last 6 months, looked its own mother in the eye at breakfast, at dinner, and in a courtroom in downtown Asheville, where a family court judge had signed off on a set of new arrangements that Kevin had helped ask for himself. Ryan crossed the field last. Carol met him halfway. She did not hug him. She did not shake his hand either. She simply stopped in front of him and looked at him for a long second and then said quietly, "You came." He said, "Yes, ma'am." She smiled. It was a real smile. It went all the way to her eyes. "You want to come sit down at the table," she said. "I brought sweet tea, and Kevin made cookies. I have been reliably informed the cookies are important." "Yes, ma'am." They walked back across the field together. Kevin got up off the grass with a small grunt and made his way to the table, one crutch and one leg at a time, and Ghost walked beside him, matching his pace, shortening his stride to the boys without being told. Ryan watched them go. He thought for a moment about the clearing that morning in December, about the rotor wash pushing at his back, about Paula's hand slamming the doorframe, about every reason he should have gotten on that helicopter. He thought about the dog planting himself in front of the skid, refusing to move, staring at a tree line that had not, from anyone else's point of view, contained a single thing worth staring at. He thought about the cost of the choice, a written reprimand, a suspension, a conversation with a director he had never met, a hollow he had almost drowned in, a radio that had almost not gotten through, a branch that had almost twice come down at the wrong angle. He looked at Kevin sitting at the picnic table now, laughing at something his mother was saying. He looked at Ghost lying on the grass at the boy's feet, with his amber eyes half closed against the sun. He put his hand, without thinking about it, against the inside pocket of his jacket, folded page, blue ink, careful, slightly slanted handwriting, still there. He thought, quietly, that if he had it to do again, he would drop his pack the same way. He would turn his back on the helicopter the same way. He would walk toward his dog, and this time, he thought, he would do it a little faster. He crossed the last few steps to the table. Carol handed him a paper cup of sweet tea. Kevin held out the plate of cookies. Ghost lifted his head from the grass and thumped his tail, once, twice, 3 times. The sun was warm on the back of Ryan's neck. He sat down. He stayed. If this story reached something in you, do me a favor before you go. Let me know down in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. Tell me what you would have done in that clearing, and share this story with someone who needs to hear about the kind of loyalty that walks toward the trees instead of away from them. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next story.